Good evening and welcome to the Smart Questions Club presented by Utah Political Hub. Tonight we have two members of the Utah Board of Education, Brittney Cummins and the newest member, Stan Lockhart. Welcome to the Smart Questions Club. We're glad to have you guys here tonight. If we could just introduce you both very quickly. Brittney, tell us about yourself and how long you've been on the board.
I have been on the board since January. I have been involved in education mostly through my kids. I have 5 kids and been involved with different parts of their education over the last 15 years. But I graduated from Brigham Young University with a Bachelor's of Science in Biology teaching. So I'm excited to be on the board and excited about what we're doing.
Go Cougs. All right. Stan Lockhart.
So I've been on the board the grand total of 5 days, and
now that said, you've got some extensive background in science education as well, don't you?
yeah. So I've been very involved in the STEM Action Center and getting STEM-based curriculum into the classroom and promoting hands-on education for our kids, experiential education, and had a wonderful experience doing that. And then recently, Mark Openshaw, the incumbent in this seat, passed away in an airplane accident with his wife and 2 children, and I was selected by the governor to take his place. And I just want to do a job that he'd be proud of, and so I'm just trying to do my very best.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stan. And thank you, Brittney. We appreciate your time tonight. So recently, the board decided to add 30 days to a comment period time on new science standards. Now, last year we saw more debate around the Common Core standards, and we've seen less of that this time, but still some. Could you give us just a brief background on why we're establishing new science standards and why there's any controversy around creating science standards? Brittney, why don't you go ahead and lead us off? I know you helped develop these standards, didn't you?
Well, I haven't helped develop them. They have actually been in the works for a couple of years. The science standards that are currently adopted as Utah Science Standards have been around for a while. And so it kind of came up as teachers and educators decided, we need to refresh these standards. And so a couple of years ago, they began the process of looking and seeing what can we do to our current standards, where can we improve them. And so the writing committee has been in the process of doing this for a couple of years. I've only been involved in the last few months as they've kind of come out into the public eye. And so there's been a lot of input and a lot of change just over the last couple of months, but there's a lot of good things happening. Did you want me to talk more specifically about what those are? Or?
Yeah, if you don't mind, give us a little bit about what they are that's changing.
Okay, so before the standards were very content-based. So, for example, I'm going to learn this item, just very content-based. What they were looking for was a set of standards that would move students less focused on content and more on performance measures. So they would, instead of learn this topic, it would be model this idea or create this. And so that was the intent, was to find and to produce some standards that would create a different learning environment in a classroom, similar to what board member Lockhart was saying earlier, and some of the STEM Action Center ideas was getting that content. Also, these new standards contain engineering components, which were absent in the old standards. And so the idea was to move forward, look at what science in the classroom can look like, and create some standards around those ideas.
Man, I don't think we even knew what engineering was when I was in high school, let alone had the opportunity to learn about it. Not that I'm old enough to remember what high school was like. Stan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so standards, it's important that we look at these standards in the context. We already have standards in the state, and all we're doing is refreshing them after many, many years. It's always good to look at what you have, see if they're There's ways of doing things better, and then make improvements. And so to the extent that these are improvements over our old standards, then everyone should be in favor of them. The real challenge is figuring out what the differences are between the new standards and the old standards, and then having a legitimate discussion on the pros and the cons of what we're doing. Brittney had some great comments. In the macro picture, these basic changes of having more experimentation of the concepts you learn and embedding more engineering into the curriculum, and even the integration of several disciplines in science have the potential to be very positive changes. But but you have to get into the details before you really figure it out, and we're actually still finalizing the details. The reason to have public input is to get suggestions on what could be better and what the people are suggesting might work even better than what's already there. And so we don't have the final version out yet, and that's why we've had so much public input. We've just gotten through a 90-day of input, and there's been a whole bunch of changes that have resulted. In fact, I was just talking to our people at the State Office of Education today about some of those changes, and they said one of the suggestions was that it needs to be simpler. It just is too verbose, and we just need to make it much more simple about the outcomes that we're expecting. Standards are like the umbrella, Daniel, and then below standards you have curriculum, and then you have the daily lesson plans of the teachers. And so the more simple that we can make the standards, the better that teachers and principals and superintendents can go get the curriculum necessary to get the right outcomes in the classroom.
Now, you talked about making them simpler. Was that a suggestion that came out of the Office of Education, or was that one of the comments from parents?
That was a comment. I believe that was a comment from parents and teachers.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing to have that kind of response and to be able to work that in. I'm sure parents would be excited to hear that. Now, one of the things I noticed in one of the articles I was reading is that some of the concerns are about what the actual standards are, that they cover things that some individuals find to be controversial and things that they'd prefer to be taught at home. Climate change, evolution. Why is that a concern? Why are parents worried about that? And should they be? Sure.
There actually isn't a lot of change in what is covered in those specific areas from the old standards to the new. The content of evolution isn't going to cover any more or less than what is in the current standards. The same with other things. Some of the questions and the feedback or the focus on in the new proposed standards were a little bit stronger in the environmental arena. And so a lot of the feedback that came back was, is it too heavy on the environmental side? And can we have these same discussions and content without pushing students into feeling guilty about the choices they make and how that, how they interact with their planet, basically.
But
and
guilt
so
is
some
a
of that,
powerful motivator, right?
Yeah. But some of that feedback has come back, and the writing team has taken into consideration the age of the students, what the content would be in each of those grades, and those are going to be some of the changes that will take place in some of the new writing that's taking place right now. And so, but there's nothing that is in the proposed standards is more than what was in the old standards as far as evolution and environmental issues and things like that.
Fantastic. Now, just for my own information, is there any relationship between what the standards are that you're developing here and what was done with Common Core, or are they separate issues altogether?
From my understanding, they're separate issues. The group who has put together the NGSS standards, which is the framework that the writers are working with, is completely different, from my understanding, as far as I know, is completely different than those who put together the Common Core standards for language arts and math. but I think the similarity is that it comes from a group outside of Utah, a cooperative group, a national cooperative group who's worked together to create those standards. And so I think that's the similarity to Common Core, where people feel like it's coming from somewhere else, but it's not associated specifically with the people who wrote the Common Core state standards.
Okay. Okay. Kurt, any questions you want to throw out there and welcome Kurt to the conversation. Any questions you want to throw out there?
No, not right now. I'm still recovering. Sorry, my run took long. I was slower than I thought I was going to be. So.
Kurt's an ultra runner. I think you ran Grandeur Peak tonight, right?
I did. Well, run is a strong word. But I did go to the top and come back down.
Well, let me ask you a question, Brittney and Stan. If I'm a parent, what can I expect to see that's different as a result of these standards? Will there be more testing? Are my children going to be getting into different kinds of projects? Should I be looking into that? What should I be expecting?
Do you want me to give it a shot, Brittney?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing that you'll see is more of a focus on experiencing the concepts that are being taught through experiments, through field trips, there's many ways to let kids touch and feel and experience the concepts they're learning, but there will be more of that as a result. The other thing that we've gone to, it used to be that all the textbooks keyed off of the standards that Texas and California had. And they've really gone away from that in recent years so that each state can put together curriculum based on their own standards and without having to buy really expensive textbooks that don't even comply with their standards. So we now have a unique opportunity to develop curriculum that will be very specific to what we want taught in Utah. And so they'll be very Utah-centric. And we're not going to have to worry about standards that other states are setting that we may or may not agree with being what's in the textbooks that are taught in our schools.
Dude,
And then, can I say something?
I was just going to ask a question. How much are textbooks used anymore? So my first child is going to junior high this year, but I have 5 kids in school, and I have not seen a textbook at all. And I don't remember if that was how it was for me in elementary school or not. Sorry, we got visitors.
You've got a prop, Kurt.
Yeah, she's never had a textbook. So it just makes me curious. I wonder if I'm going to see something different in junior high, or, clearly we're moving away from that, but is it at all levels or just in lower levels?
Well, I'm not sure I'm equipped to give you a full answer on that question, but here's the best I've got for you. Just as in the world of software, we have something called open source that can be shared. We're kind of getting to the point where textbooks can be kind of open source based, and then you can pick and choose the parts that fit your standards, and you can literally customize your curriculum to the standards that you have. And so you'll see much more you'll see the textbooks won't necessarily be the bound $150 per textbook kind. They'll be more they'll be workbook based or worksheet based. They'll be taking stuff and doing it maybe on a district level or something along those lines. But you can literally pick and choose the information that you want to convey to those kids. And our state's already done that with math, and now we have an opportunity to do it in science.
So what you're telling me is no more brown paper book covers. That's what I'm hearing.
Yes, no more brown paper book covers. That's right.
Brittney, you'd wanted to pipe in and say something there after Stan was talking a minute or so ago.
I was just going to say something about the testing that you mentioned.
Yes.
Science is currently already part of the SAGE test assessment, and I was speaking to a gentleman who was part of one of the original writing group for the standards when they were looking for a format to build from, and he mentioned the excitement that when you have a set of standards that are project-based, it can inform a more responsive testing, which our SAGE has the opportunity to do. And I know none of these systems are perfect yet, but for example, you know, in the old CRT system, you'd say, you know, what does a circuit look like, A, B, C, D, and, you know, a student would have to identify it. Whereas under the new SAGE system, the opportunity is there for a student to say, you know, build a circuit, you know, and so they would click and pull, and they would have to build and show that they understand the concept fully. And so hopefully the idea is that the testing and the standards will create an opportunity for students to experience science and understand it rather than just, you know, memorize and regurgitate information. And so there's a lot of potential in the testing. You know, it's just getting it right and making sure that it's good and it's helpful to students and teachers.
You know, when I was growing up in the 80s, the competitor that we always heard trotted out for us was Japan. Are we keeping up with Japan? Is this in people's minds as we're teaching science now, is keeping up with China and the hundreds of thousands of engineers that are training there? What is driving this? Either one of you.
I think. Oh.
Go ahead, Brittney.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I don't know for sure. I mean, because it's obviously a national topic, you know, as we talk about education and promoting, making sure that our students are competitive in the workforce. And so I don't know if it's any one country anymore. I mean, there's many who are succeeding as far as standardized tests go. It's difficult to say, are we measuring students properly, but I think the motion is good. Are we improving, and what are we setting as our benchmarks? And I think the questions that we ask, and just the opportunity for us as a state to look at our standards and really ask the questions, what do we want to see our students accomplishing, is a great opportunity and an exercise. And I'm glad that we've had so much feedback so far, and that we'll get some additional feedback on the standards as well.
It feels like a positive direction. It feels like we're moving in the right direction. And I haven't sensed the acrimony over it that some other changes have had of late. As we tie up, is there anything that you think that people don't get and that you wish that they understood better about this process and about the standards and about what's happening on the board?
Well, I'd just say that our Utah standards are being built by Utahns. It's true that we've used some of the concepts out of the next generation science standards, but I think when we're done, you'll look at those national suggestions, and you'll look at what our standards are, and our standards will have different language, and it'll be formatted in a different way, and it'll have some of those same concepts, again, experimentation and engineering principles embedded in the curriculum and things like that. But they're going to be very unique to Utah, and that's why we're having so much comment. Having a 90-day comment period and then having another 30-day comment period, if we're not happy with the amount of input we've gotten in that period of time, we may even have more comment periods, because we're absolutely determined as a school board to make sure this is a collaborative experience with the people of the state of Utah, so that we can really, truly have these standards be the standards that the majority of Utahns want to have for their children.
Brittney, any final comments? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, and I would say ditto to that a little bit, that, you know, there was never any intent to mislead the public or to make them feel like, you know, that we weren't trying to be open and transparent in this process. That yes, we are using a national framework to build from. And, you know, the intent was never to adopt them as the draft standards were given to the 90-day, but, you know, the intent was put your input in. What do you think of this framework? What do you think of what we have? And I think as the process goes forward, I think people are going to be happy with what we're able to put together. You know, science is science. It's science in Utah, it's science in California, and, you know, and there is a lot of value in looking and seeing what is working and what is available, but then bringing it home and looking at it and seeing, you know, what can we do to make this great, and how can we improve the outcomes for Utah students?
Kurt, any final questions? Any final thoughts?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I'm coming
Come
late.
on, Kurt. You're supposed to be. You're the provocative foil tonight. You're not doing your job.
Whoever assigned me that job doesn't know me. No. But what I would say is just coming at it from a parent's perspective. I mean, I like what Stan and Brittney had to say. I mean, having a Utah, a Utah solution or a Utah set of standards doesn't require that you reinvent the wheel. Certainly you should look at what's been done elsewhere. As a parent, I'm much more concerned, about the substance of the standard than what's the name on the paper that we started with or whatever. How much are we going to be testing my kids? Are they going to get out for more than one field trip a year? Because my kids go on one field trip, and it's at the end of May every school year. That's it. That's the only time they leave that classroom. The rest of the time, they're testing and learning, and so, I have lots of questions about that, but that's my concern. And I think anything we can do, just to turn the discussion toward that, then it becomes productive. Otherwise, everyone's just chasing their tails or something. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you much, everyone. I know when I was a kid, like every kid probably, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I lost that when I had to memorize the periodic table. And I'm sure if I had had more hands-on, I might have at least made it through physics all the way. But in any regards, I hope this does good things for Utah. I'm excited to hear that they're going to be doing more hands-on and less memorizing, or at least hands-on with the memorizing, because I think you still need to learn those things. Brittney, Stan, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it. We appreciate your time. I know you guys are busy, and there's a lot of work on the board, and you guys don't do that full time, so thank you. We appreciate your efforts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a great night, everyone.
Okay, bye.
All right. Thank you.